facts about some animals that I know.
Oh, that'd be great. Go ahead and start us off with some fun facts.
So since we're going to be doing a follow-up video for mammals today, I have some African mammals that I like to share some fun facts about. For example, there is an animal that has a 2-foot-long tongue that can actually use its tongue to clean its eyeballs, its ears, and its nose. And its neck, despite being several feet long, has the same number of vertebrae, 7 vertebrae in their neck as we do. Do you know what animal it is, David?
That's a giraffe.
That's a giraffe, yes. And giraffes, actually, when they're born, moms give birth standing up. So typically, a baby giraffe will fall 6 feet to the ground when it is first born. Yep. It's like, welcome to the world. Another cool African mammal fact. This is a mammal that lives in Africa, but it's a relative to the Florida manatee. And they have giant ears, which are very good for hearing. They actually use those more like ear conditioning to flap back and forth, but their feet are actually more important in hearing than their ears. You know what animal I'm talking about?
The elephant.
This would be the African elephant, yeah. So their feet, when you think about elephant feet, you think about them being kind of round and clumpy and stumpy. Their toes and their bones and their toes are kind of positioned so they're walking on tiptoes, and there's actually this really absorbent layer of almost like fat that is filling in the rest of that portion of their foot, and they are actually able to absorb sound waves and vibrations in the ground through their feet, and they actually hear using their feet. So David, your feet smell, but their feet hear.
David, do you have any animal facts you'd like to share with us?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about the same 2 animals that Lisa talked about, giraffes actually have one close relative, the Okapi, if you ever heard about it. It's quite an odd animal.
Zebra pants.
Not that a giraffe is not odd, way, but they do have zebra pants, so their legs have a zebra stripe pattern, while the rest of their body is very dark brown. And they live in very forested areas, jungles really. So it's very odd. But the face area, the head, it's very much like a giraffe's head. Not long neck though; it's a shorter neck. Still long, but not that long. And then the elephants, like Alyssa said, they are related to manatees and dugongs. But the closest relative other than those 2 is actually a small mammal called the hyrax, which is about this big, kind of the size of a large guinea pig, and they kind of look like a guinea pig too, but they're actually related to elephants. It's pretty cool.
One more thing, I was just thinking about the Okapi and the giraffe. First of all, I think the word Okapi is, I'm not sure what African language, so I don't want to say, I want to say Swahili, but I could be wrong. That word actually means ghost, because they were, for so long, they're so elusive and shy that they were called like the ghosts of the forest or the ghosts of the jungle. But those knobs that they have on their heads, those are not ears. They're actually part of the skull. So it's actually part of the bone of the skull, which is really neat.
We have a quick question about elephants. How do you tell the difference between an African elephant and an Indian elephant?
I got it. Sorry. For those of you who did not know, this used to be my job, talking about elephants. So African elephants, one really easy way to tell is looking at the ears. The ear shape of an African elephant looks like the continent of Africa. And the Asian elephants are going to have smaller ears. And they actually kind of look like India, and that's where you can find an Asian elephant, so that's helpful. Another way you can tell is the tusks. So in African elephants, both males and females are going to have tusks. In Asian elephants, only the male elephants will have tusks. Size-wise, African elephants tend to be larger. Asian elephants tend to be smaller. The coloration is usually a little different. So African elephants tend to be more of a dusty grayish brown, while Asian elephants almost have like a reddish brown coloration. Their heads are also different as well. So African elephants are going to have kind of a little or single hump on the head, and Asian elephants will actually have a little divot right in the middle, kind of like the letter N. So
That's very interesting. The elephants actually are not related to each other.
No, they're not.
Even though they kind of have very similar characteristics, like I was saying, a lot of those characteristics are very much different, and they're actually different genus, so they're not related to each other than their elephants.
Yeah, there could never be an African-Asian elephant hybrid. It would be like having a cat and dog reproduce. So, yeah, very different. I think we're ready to go ahead and hop in and talk about some barrier island stuff, as interesting as elephants are. We don't have any elephants here.
No, we don't.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our live follow-up from yesterday's video where David talked to us about mammals. So you remember David. I'm Alyssa. You've met me before, probably. Abigail, whenever you are ready, we would love to answer some questions.
All right. So, yesterday, David, you talked to us about mammals. Alyssa, would you go ahead and tell us why mammals are called mammals?
So, believe it or not, it is not because they live with their mamas. So that's what I thought for a long time, is that the word mammal had the word mama in it. So, like, the mamas give live birth and nurse their young. And so that's why I thought they were called mammals. But it does have to do with that nursing of the young. So the milk that's produced by the mother mammal comes from the mammary gland. That's where that milk is produced. And so that word, mammary, is how we of this particular group of animals, the mammals. So.
All right, thank you. David, we had some more curiosity yesterday whenever you mentioned what a marsupial is. Could you tell us a little bit about, the possum and why it's called a marsupial, and then maybe some other marsupials that we can find around the world?
Yeah. So, like I said yesterday, mammals do give birth to live young, with the exception, of course, of platypus and echidna. I hope you guys looked that up and found out a little bit more about them. But the marsupials do give birth to live young, so just like the majority of the mammals do, but they do it a little bit different. Placental, they have some bodies develop something called a placenta, which envelops the young and protects the entire time that it's in the mom's belly, and then the young is given birth to fully developed and ready to be taken care of by the mom outside of the womb, or just be walking around on its own and be able to feed. Now, marsupials do not develop completely inside of the mother's womb. They come out, whether it is 1/4 of the development to all the way to half the development, and they have to crawl all the way from the womb to a pouch. And this pouch has a place where they can continue the development even though it's outside of the mother's womb or outside of the body. Now, it's very interesting, when the baby is born, it only has a few parts of its body developed. So it'll only have front claws, it'll probably only have a sense of smell, and then the mouth and stomach area. Everything else is kind of just still developing. So, and it's also very tiny. So some marsupial is only the size, or they can fit inside of a teaspoon, which is very tiny. And they have to crawl all the way up to the pouch, where they can latch onto a teat, which they'll drink milk from, and that will give them all the development that they need to continue. So other marsupials around the world, we mostly find them in Australia and New Zealand. We'll have kangaroos, of course, very famous one, koalas, Tasmanian devils, wombats. All those animals are marsupials, and they seem to have all found in the continent of Australia, New Zealand included in that, and of course we have some here in North America. Actually, we only have one, the possum, the Virginia opossum. Yes, so that's it. It's actually pretty cool, and I'm just gonna add this other part as a very cool fact. A kangaroo or any other marsupial, they can have multiple generations at one time on a single mother. So the mother can be pregnant, having a baby inside of her womb. She can have a baby nursing inside of the pouch, and a newborn that has already developed, that's already outside of the pouch, that keeps coming into the pouch to drink milk all at the same time. And she has the ability to develop different types of milk in order to accommodate for both of those joeys, which is what a baby kangaroo is called. It's pretty cool. So that's 3 generations in one animal.
That's very neat. So we're already kind of talking about milk a little bit now with the joeys. Could you tell us what are the benefits, Alyssa, to drinking milk for the young as opposed to them coming out and eating live food, like when sharks come out for them, you know, they can go right out and they can start eating a fish immediately. But what's the benefit for an animal drinking milk?
David kind of mentioned this already, but the milk of the mother can kind of be customized for the individual baby. So basically, mother's milk can provide nutrients or to help develop the immune system of the baby, and it can be much more specific for the needs of that particular individual to allow them to develop. Whereas a shark, if it's going out and it's eating tuna, that tuna, as I'm sure you guys know, didn't think like, okay, how can I develop myself to be best nutritious for this particular shark? That's not exactly how that happened. It does provide nutrients for the animal, but the immune system, especially in the nutrients in the milk, for example, the calcium that allows the bones of the baby to grow are much more concentrated in the mother's milk, and it's kind of like a individualized formula for that particular individual. Because as the baby is in the womb growing, the mammary glands are beginning to produce that milk that is specific for the DNA of that individual in the womb. So it's a lot more specialized, which means it takes a lot more energy, it takes a lot more effort, which is why we see mammals typically having a few babies at a time as opposed to having lots and lots and lots of babies, because it does take so much more time and effort to kind of individualize the nutrients and the other things that help with the development in the mother's milk. But it also means that that baby has a higher chance of surviving. So I kind of answered a bigger question. I know that you had been interested in answering as well. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, in everything in nature and animals, there's a pro and con to everything. And some pros outweigh some of the cons, but there's still going to be cons. And Alyssa did mention why. I mean, why would a mammal give birth to a young that is fully dependent on them versus just letting them go and being on their own? Like I said, like she mentioned, there are pros and cons to both of those things.
All right. So I know we kind of touched on this yesterday a little bit, but could you tell us, David, about maybe some more of the mammals you can find here on Seabrook Island specifically?
Yeah, here on Seabrook Island, we're going to find most of the mammals that we do find in the state of South Carolina, with the exception of a few. Here on Seabrook specifically, we have the largest of our mammals is the white-tailed deer, very common around this area. And the reason why it's so common is because there actually are very few predators. We do not have the coyote that's here on the island itself. They're mostly found on the mainland. And none of the other large predators that could be found other parts of the state, like bears. We do have bobcat here, so that is a sort of medium-sized to small-sized predator, but they focus more on smaller prey, like squirrels. We have rabbits here, and then a plethora of rodents, so different species of mice that live here on the island. And am I forgetting any? We have smaller mammals. Yeah, that's right. So raccoons, possums. We have armadillos, which you actually saw an armadillo the other day. It's pretty cool. Fox, that's right. We have the gray fox, which the gray foxes are a very elusive species. Not many people get to see, but they are found here, and hopefully the population does increase a little bit. Very lucky that we do not have wild boar on the island. These are an invasive species that are found all over the south, really, but here on the island we haven't gone any. It's only a matter of time though, and hopefully it doesn't happen.
What about skunks?
We do not have any skunks here on the island. We do have some on the mainland, but here on Seabrook, at least I have not seen one or have been told that there is one, but I might be wrong. Now, animals that do not live on land, or mammals that don't live on land, we do have a few of them. Obviously, the water's right here, the Atlantic Ocean, and we have a plethora of dolphins. So this is a very good dolphin environment, and we have a very strong population of dolphins. Manatees do come up this far north. We have not seen any here, but I'm sure that they are kind of cruising along the Atlantic right here next to the coast.
It's quite warm enough here yet for them, but in the summertime especially, the water gets warm enough here to see them. When the water is colder in the winter months, off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, we also can sometimes see migrating whales, like right whales. So that's pretty cool.
That's very neat. And in the more marshy areas of our coast here, or kind of the transition between the estuary and then going into the more upland forest, that marsh area, we do have sea otters. I'm sorry, not sea otters. Oh, I wish we had sea otters. River otters, and we have minks. And I got to see a mink not too long ago. It's pretty cool.
Is a mink kind of like a ferret?
It is a ferret. They're in the same family as otters and ferrets. They're just more water dwelling.
Cool.
All right. And lastly, our last question is going to be, so we've talked about that we have mammals here on our island. We've talked about the types of mammals here on our island. How are the mammals that you find either here on our island or mammals on other islands going to be different from those mammals that you might find on the mainland?
This is a very good question, and it deals with population dynamics and the differences between one population and the next. Because most of the animals that we have here, like I mentioned, are the same species as the animals that are in the mainland. But every single time you have an island, there's going to be obviously separation. You're going to have an area it's not linked to another area, so animals have to move by swimming in this case. And not every animal can swim, and those that can swim, that's a lot of energy for them to do, so they tend to stick around. Well, this has changes sometimes in the population. Animals that live on an island, they tend to develop skills or develop characteristics that are a little different than those on the mainland, even though they keep the genetic makeup of being the same species. They sometimes don't have predators to attack them on this island, which is the case with this one here, which is why our deer on this island are developing sort of different characteristics than the ones in the mainland. We have a higher population. We have deer that may interbreed a little bit more because the population is so high, so we get characteristics like piebald deer, which are, you can look it up online what a piebald deer looks like, but basically a deer that kind of looks like a cow in terms of how it's colored. It's not big like a cow, but it's
White patches.
yes, there you go. And so those types of things tend to keep on developing in populations that are isolated like this. A great example of deer specifically is found in the Florida Keys, and we have white-tailed deer in the Florida Keys, but because they've been isolated for so long, the population has actually developed a form of dwarfism, which means that they're very tiny deer. And the key deer is actually an endangered population, but they're still the same species as the mainland deer, but they're very tiny. You can also again look up some pictures of them, and you'll see how tiny they actually are. But that's a great example of that. When we're talking about elephants, there are dwarf elephants, and they're
the forest elephant?
Sri Lankan elephant, I think it's called.
Sri Lanka.
Yeah, and some of them are in pink in color.
Yeah.
Again, look that up if you want to see a pink elephant, and hopefully it's the right one. They're more fleshy color than pink, but they're white lighter. And so these populations could happen very easily on an island, and sometimes, which is actually pretty cool, because DeVoe here, we have a piece of land called DeVoe Bank, which is not yet an island. It doesn't have any mammals in it at the moment. There are no mammals that have swum across to there, so there is no population that's being built up. But once it does, then we're going to see a difference in the population.
I will say I did find a mammal on DeVoe Bank, but it was a dead mammal.
Was it an armadillo?
It was an armadillo. So armadillos can swim. So we're not sure if that washed up dead. What I think actually happened was the armadillo swam across, and then once it got there, it's really not habituated for armadillos to survive. So probably starved to death, and that's why it was over there. But it is interesting because if an area is not situated or it's not doesn't have the right environmental characteristics for a certain type of animal to survive, then you're not going to see the population of that animal. But I think once DeVoe gets more trees and more vegetation, I think armadillos will probably be one of the first mammalian species that we find over there because they can swim, which is actually how we find them here. They swim here. So
Yes, absolutely.
speaking of swimming, this is just fun. The other day I was watching the sunset at the marsh, and I saw something moving through the water, and my first thought was alligator, but then I realized that it was too small to be an alligator, and the shape was just not quite right, and I realized it was a raccoon. It was a raccoon swimming through the marsh, so that happened as well. It was really cute. He was getting some oysters. So I think that is all we have today. There will be our very last live video tomorrow morning at 11. Is that correct, Abigail?
Yes, that'll be our last live class tomorrow at 11. We're so sad to be leaving you all. That'll be orienteering, which is our compass class, so we learn about navigation there. And then our last live session with you all is going to be Friday morning at 11, and we'll do some follow-up questions, some orienteering, and maybe have a little bit of fun.
Maybe just a little bit. All right, well, thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. We hope that you have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the pretty spring weather, and signing off. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.